Ready? It is 2:08. We're going to call the public permit hearing to order. I'll have all members present except Mark Caraba, Chris Zeig, and Gary Meckler. Item number 1, permit hearing on the following operating permit application. 1, operating permit for 4-Star Family Limited Partnership. Well number 3, BVOP-0325. Located 0.91 miles south-southwest of the intersection of Salter Farm Road and FM 2159 in Robertson County. Total maximum annual production from the water well is 205 acre-feet per year at a maximum rate of 375 gallons per minute for agricultural use. The well will produce from the Brazos River alluvium aquifer.
We had no comments that we received.
All right. Item number 2, permit hearing on the following drilling operating permit application. 1, drilling operating permit for Nelda Calhoun. Well number 2, BVDO-0425, located 0.43 miles southwest of the intersection of Old Hearn Road and State Highway 6 in Robertson County. Total maximum annual production from the water well is 233.75 acre-feet per year at a maximum rate of 300 gallons per minute for agricultural and industrial uses. The well will produce from the Simsboro aquifer.
And we've received no comments.
Item number 3, discussion and possible action on the following operating permit applications. The 1, operating permit for 4-Star Family Limited Partnership, well number 3, BVOP-0325.
So this is an alluvial well that's been in place for quite some time. Jim has come in for 4-Star Family Partnership and asking to permit the well for agricultural use at a rate of 375 gallons a minute, 205 acre-feet per year maximum. It did not require a footprint to be drawn because it is an alluvial well. It has met all of the parameters that we require for administrative complete. It is an administrative complete application. And if anybody's got any questions, I'd certainly be willing to answer those. If not, I'd ask that you approve the permit as presented.
Any questions from the board? If not, entertain a motion.
Move we approve the permit.
Have a motion for approval
Second.
and a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Item number 4, permit hearing on the following drilling operating permit application. 1, drilling operating permit for Nelda Calhoun. Well number 2, BVDO-0425.
So this is, again, it's a Simsboro application. Everything is administratively complete. Nelda indicated she's going to have a multi-use on this. This would be for 1 for agricultural use, forage production. The other would be an industrial use for possible bottling of water and ice production. At 300 gallons per minute with a total of 233.75 acre-feet per year. You can see the on the next, there's the footprint of the well. All sits easily within the property they own or control. In your write-up, you'll see all the figures here on the screen of how the radius was calculated. It takes 6.06 contiguous acres for this particular well. Again, it has met all of the tenets to be an administratively complete application. Again, a Simsboro well. If anyone has any questions, now would be the time to ask.
South of town?
South of town, that's correct. Out there, basically be to the west of where the was it Alan Samuels? Right off out in there.
So this one be charged based on the agricultural use and then if the
Agricultural and
industrial gets
Tillsville.
used.
So it's used, yes.
Any other questions for Alan?
I'd ask that you, approve the permit as presented.
Let the record show that Gary Meckler has joined the meeting and I entertain a motion for this item.
Motion to approve.
Have a motion for approval
Second.
and a second. All in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. We will adjourn the permit hearing, move to the regular board meeting. First item of business will be pledge of allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Have a quorum present with directors Caraba and Chris Zeig absent. Move on to public comment on non-agenda items.
We've had no comments turned in.
Public comment on agenda items. I have an item here for Ms. Kathy Goss. New rule change.
I'm Kathy Goss, I'm from Calvert, Texas. Normally, I have a lot to say that I may not agree with y'all, but I have to say with this rule change and being able to measure the wells, I think that is a great idea of adding the piece that will help them easily measure the well depth. And I think it's going to become more and more increasingly important to do this. So my one question I think that will come from the public is this going to be an extra fee for the well owner, and approximately how much? And I think that question will come up, and I don't expect you to answer that today. On when you discuss rates and fees, till we start transporting water and producing water for transport, I'm kind of in hopes that the fees will remain where they are. Transport still seems to be a way out. My fear, although I'm against it going out of district, I see the reason for having it go out of the district. That's how we get money for our infrastructure. We just have to allow you and the water district to manage it. So I think if you have enough faith in them, and I think Brazos County needs to realize that they should have enough faith in you and in the water district to manage any water that would be removed from this area. Thank you.
All right. Any other comments from the public on agenda items? Hearing none, move to item number 1, discussion and possible action on the minutes of the April 10th, 2025 permit hearing and regular board meeting.
So in your packet, you have the draft minutes from the April 10th board meeting. We put these up online and have sent this out to everyone for review prior to the meeting. Anybody's got any questions, I'd be willing to try and answer those, or if you've got any additions or corrections, now would be the time to bring that to our attention. If not, I'd ask that you approve the minutes as presented.
Any questions from the board on the minutes? If not, entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Item number 2, financial report for April 2025.
Okay, again, in your package, you'll see we start off with deposits. Total deposits for the month were $136,448.29. We are collecting and have almost collected all of our 2024 fees. Like one entity that still owes $1.48. And otherwise, we've collected all 2024 fees. We're now into collecting the 2025 fees, which are based on permitted amounts, different from last year. So we're we're still in real good shape there. It's, I don't know, what we, $2,000 or $3,000 of those that are still out there that aren't monthly. So, we didn't receive as much pushback as we thought that we did. There was some confusion that they were getting two sets of invoices, but we think we resolved that. So anyway, that's the deposits for the month of April. Moving on to the balance sheet, you can see we have the two operating accounts, one being the well assistance fund, the other just our basic operating fund, both over at South Star Bank. And then you can see our 4 certificates of deposit that total $835,733.56. So our current checking and CD assets are approaching 1.2 million, with the total assets at just over 1.6 million. And then moving over to your liabilities and equity, again, as always, retained earnings holds the lion's share of the equity at just over 1.4 million. And you can see that the balances out with our earlier number. Moving on to the next page is your budget expenditures. So far in total dollars that fees and other that have been collected for 2025, there's $462,118.17. Please remember that we have money that has been dedicated, sent in to us by Upwell that is being held as money to be paid when we have SOA expenses. So that's part of a bit of an inflated number if depending on how much of that money is spent. But that is held in the income. Our total expenses for the year is just approaching 407,000. And we've used about 32% of the budget. We would expect to use a third of the budget in the 4 months. So we're right on track there. Okay, then on, here is your the collateralization report. You can see, this is the first part. These are our CDs that we just talked about. And moving down here, and I'm apologize for the size of this, didn't realize it was this small, but we're collateralized at, well, first of all, our percent of portfolio as far as CDs concerned are approaching 70%, 30% is in cash, with the collateralized level at Prosperity Bank being 565%, and the collateralization at South Star Bank at 116%. Here's our rundown of checks written, and I'll put my pen down so that I don't get hit.
I think they have that other.
Which one?
The collateralization. Yeah, I don't have them in there.
You don't have the collateralization report in there?
I'll get you.
We'll get copies. Sorry about that. Checks written, 114,441.10. And you can see, and it's not just checks, these are ACH, that type of thing. Lloyd Gosselin was about $73,000. That was for 3 months of work that was done, and that's all primarily the work that was done on state level litigation in district court. But we hadn't been receiving those invoices once we got 3 at one time, so that's why the $73,000 there. You see, we're spending a good bit of money also on our hydrogeology, which we should be doing. So you see AGS up there, just over $12,000. Everything else is pretty standard as we go down through. And we drew $11.77 in interest on the well assistance fund with no money being drawn out or checks written. Anybody have any questions on the financial report?
Any questions from the board on the financial report?
Thought I'd ask that you approve them as presented.
Entertain a motion?
Motion to approve.
I'll second it. A motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Item number 3, discussion on draft rule amendments, including but not limited to requiring the installation of well seals that provide access to obtain water level measurements and registration of wells prior to service work being performed, and possible action on setting a date for a rules hearing.
So what we're running into more and more is when wells are being drilled, the drillers, not anyone in particular, but they're filling up all the holes, all the access holes on the well seal. So when we get there and, we go to every new well. And when we get there, we not only get the GPS coordinates, we get the elevation, we get pictures, and we try to get a water level. And in getting the water level, and we have land elevation, we can ascertain above sea level and make sure that we're qualifying it in the correct aquifer, okay? And then be able to compare that to others that we know. If I don't have a port, we can't get that. I'm not saying I don't trust drillers to give us the number, the static water level. I do some, and some of them I don't. And water levels vary once the well's drilled. It depends on how long, when the static water level was taken, and how long did the well driller allow it to recover, and did it recover, and those types of things. So we can get an accurate number. We got a baseline, then we'll be able to work with that going off into perpetuity. So what I am asking is twofold. One is to prescribe that the well seal on any of these wells that are new wells are being put in, allow us when they leave a port at least a half an inch in diameter for us to be able to obtain a water level measurement. And I'll read through number 1. And in also doing that, the second thing is, as a well driller is called to be work on a well, that they change that well seal out when they leave. A lot of these are older wells and they don't have a well seal that's capable of letting us. They may have a 1/4 inch plug that can't even get anything. So they're going to be asked to change that well seal out, put a well seal in that will provide that access. The only way we're ever going to know whether or not work had been done on a particular well is for the well driller to call and say, is this well registered? If it's not registered, and we can give them that quick answer, yes it is, no it's not. And if it's not, then we can quickly get the well registered so that they can go out and do the work they need to do. We can then later come out and be able to obtain a water level measurement. So let me read through these two, and then we can open it up to any thoughts that you might have. So the first would be Rule 12.3.5, inspection port technical completion requirement. All wells shall be equipped with an airtight sanitary well seal with a 1/2 inch or larger interior diameter inspection port located on top of the well seal, which allows for free access to the water table for the purpose of water level measurement and disinfection. Any well presently not equipped shall in the future be so equipped when the well is serviced. On those wells with odd size casings, which cannot be fitted with a factory made watertight sanitary well seal, The completion must be done in a manner that will prevent any pollutants, waste, insects, chemicals, etc., from entering the well. So that's part one. Then Rule 12.3.6, registration of well prior to service work requirement. Well pumps and equipment shall only be installed or serviced in wells registered with the district. It is a violation of this rule for licensed well drillers, pump installers to service a well that is not licensed or registered as applicable with the district. Upon request, the district will quickly provide verification of a well's registration or permit status. I'd open up to any questions. Maybe I can give further explanation as to why I feel this is an important thing for us to be able to do. Water levels have become one of the most important things that we do. And it certainly is true in the Simsboro. It's going to be very important to do so in the Calvert Bluff as these pumping projects come online and likely the Hooper. I'm not saying that it won't in the others, but I'm saying that for people in the future, they need to know and have good data and be able to get water level measurements. So I'd open it up to any questions. I'd be glad to answer.
Will there be a penalty provision for somebody that worked on a well that wasn't registered?
Well, that's up to the board how you want to proceed. If you say it's a violation, and then we have our violation separate rule that says that we can do violations up to X, then it technically is. It's up to y'all whether y'all want to assess one or not.
We don't have to have anything specific to this.
We don't for any of the other. We just have the generic statutory guidelines on water enforcement. We've talked about at times of putting a more specific rule in place about some of my districts have that about more finite criteria on what that would be, but not yet.
I don't really this is not, I don't think will be an issue with the well drillers that we have drilling now. We've only had one or two bad actors, I'll call, in the 13 years that I've been here that just, they're the ones that aren't going to turn in the well log. They're going to, do those kinds of things. And you have to just deal with them on a case by case basis. One thing that I have reached out to the well drillers is when you put the well seal on and you have a plug, don't put it under the production pipe. I don't know why it ends up under the production pipe, but it will, I'm not going to say more often than not, but many times it's right under the production pipe. And the only way you're going to do that is to be able to some way to turn the well seal, which is not easy. So,
And he had this issue come up. I think he called Gary first. Gary do you have a rule that deals with this issue? He mentioned it to me. I was like, oh, I already have districts that do this. And I forwarded him the language. So this issue is popping up in other districts and they already have a similar rule.
So is the modification of the well seal to get the port in there, is that a major expense?
not according to, I've talked to Pete, Brian, I've talked to Johnny Williams. That didn't seem to be, it might be up to $100.
Okay.
That's what I'm hearing. Of course, the larger the diameter of the well, the more the expense would be. But for a typical 4-inch well, they seem to be thinking that it'd be a difference of $50 to $100 at the most.
But what we would require, if there's one, they come out to say they got a pump that's burned up, they come out to replace the pump, we pull it, it doesn't have that, we'd ask for them to then install that while they're working on that
Correct.
well. Yeah.
That's correct.
What if they're doing some other kind of repair other than the well, like pressure tank, pressure switch?
If it's a pressure switch, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about where you're literally going to be entering that well casing inside the well column. I wouldn't want to, it'd be great, but now you got a whole different set of equipment that
Right,
you've
you
taken
got
out there.
something
Now
over
you got to start, why would I have to take a rig that could pull something when I set my pickup out just to place a pressure switch? I think that doesn't make, not logical to me.
But rule number two, if a homeowner is out of water, he calls the pumper, the repairman calls you to check, and make sure the well is registered. If it's not registered, you're not gonna prevent that guy from working on that
We're
well.
gonna immediately register it.
Okay.
I-
Shouldn't
I-
be a delay in getting the well repaired.
Oh, certainly not. We will not be that impediment.
I assume you could also check on our website to see that the wells that are there.
They can. If they will. But
Yeah.
Yeah,
But I mean, that information is available.
it is
Well,
absolutely.
they wouldn't necessarily have to make a call. If they looked on the website, they could see whether it's registered or not. Any
So
other questions?
this is the wording that I've asked that, if this is suitable and, or if you have some changes, great. If it's suitable, then I'd like to, sooner rather than later, and I'm proposing that you set a rules hearing for the 12th of June for us to be able to go ahead and get this adopted in place so that I can get the word out to the drillers and service companies.
So do you think enforcement's gonna be an issue? Like if the drillers know that this is our rule now, it shouldn't be bad.
Not the ones I've talked to.
Okay.
Most, again, the ones that I have dealt with are very cooperative. They want to please. When I've asked them simple things, they take it and they do those things. So I foreseen no pushback from a driller or a service company.
So if it gets to the point where all the wells have that, how does that change how you're collecting data and how you can expand?
I'm sorry, say that one more time?
If this becomes a norm for the wells to have access points, how does that change how you're collecting data? Because it opens up a million new wells for you to be able
Which is
to
great.
check.
We're out in the field every day anyway. I've got to remind John in the field somewhere. It's a good thing. The more data you can have now, going back on a regular basis. The good part with opening some of these wells up that are making them accessible is that I don't have to go 4 times a year. I can go this year if we've had an inordinate amount of pumping in any given year. Well, we've got that well down there. Maybe it's 3 or 4 years down the line, but we've already measured that. Let's go back and see what's happened down there. It's just getting a baseline. You need to get a baseline.
Any other questions from the board?
So the only thing I'd ask here is that y'all approve a date for us to set a rules hearing so I can get the posting up. I gotta do a 20-day posting. And I'd ask you to consider June 12th, 2025 as a date for a rules hearing.
Entertain a motion on a date for rules hearing.
I move for June the 12th.
Second.
Have a motion and a second for June the 12th for rules hearing. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Item number 4, discussion and possible action on matters involving the planning and setting of desired future conditions for each of the managed aquifers.
Okay, let me do a quick update on our GMA 12, and then I'm gonna turn it over to James. We've got several things to visit about on model runs, things of that nature. I think it'll be very interesting to everyone. So we did meet, GMA 12 met on April the 23rd to look at the first run of all permits that were turned in from each of the districts. All of those were turned on and run, and we saw the results of that, and that was presented during that meeting. We're now at a point where each of the districts are going to turn in revised pumping files. Four of the districts wanted to turn in files that would keep the DFC at the same or thereabouts of where they are now. I have said a number of times that what we were going to do is we would turn in our pumping files that we use for our best estimate that y'all seen a number of times. We would use those as those files. That way, when it's run, all the districts can then see exactly what the effect of our files are on those DFCs and how they might miss that mark because of what we've done. And then they can decide yes or no on whether or not they would want to use our variations as for DFC consideration. So that's where we are on that. I know that the hydrologists are still working. I think, James, y'all have was it today or yesterday?
Good call yesterday.
So I'll he can update you on that. One thing that we did talk about is, let me go on to this, so I don't forget it, is the explanatory report. LRE has presented, and we agreed that LRE would be doing the explanatory report, and that was proposed to be at the same price as what James and AGS had originally turned in, but then felt that it was best not to. So they followed that same template and are willing to do the explanatory report. GMA 12 members said, yes, that's wonderful. The breakdown of costs would be Brazos Valley at 30%, same way with Lost Pines and Post Oak Savannah. Mid-East Texas and Fayette are going back to their boards to make sure that 5% was good with them. And the cost of the explanatory report, I think, the way I remember, is about 39,000 or 39,500. Was it lower than that? Okay. Anyway, but whatever the number was, this would be the breakdown. And I guess we have a meeting on June 20th. And expect that Mid-East Texas and Fayette will come back with whatever their boards, if they said yes, then we'll be able to consummate that. Today, I'll turn it over to James here in just a second. There was a discussion, but one of the discussions, and I'll bring this up quickly, is Post Oak Savannah had Steve Young to do I'll call it a model run of a stable state, meaning they looked at 500 years, they looked out 500 years of pumping on what's the effect on existing wells out 500 years. And so that's one of the things I believe that you'll have some to talk about that. But we talked about these pumping projects that are coming online, and it was said that, you know, where these groundwater pumping projects are really more of a bridge to the future. You've got Senator Prairie and his gang are looking for these alternative water sources, whether it's brackish or whether it's ASR, whatever it might be, but those things are not quite ready yet. And it's not something that a municipality could just reach out and go, okay, that's what we're going to do, and it's available to us, and here we go. So it's going to take some time to get there. In the meantime, you're going to have some pressure put on groundwater. So James suggested, and I authorized him, let's go ahead and look at a bridge run. Let's look at, and I'll not get any that, so you're going to see that in just a minute. A couple of things that we can talk about and act upon today, and I'll bring this up from previous meetings. We still need to be thinking about how we want to express our DFCs. There was talk at GMA 12 that that we might even express the DFCs both in a percent, actual artesian reduction as we have in the past, and percent remaining of available drawdown in the same report. And evidently that's easy enough to do. It's just converting from this to that. So we should be thinking about that. James is going to give you a good breakdown on this, whether we start at 2000 or we start at 2010 in his, in just a minute. And we need to be talking about the ending date of the DFC period. Is it going to be where we are now at 2070? Is it going to be at 2075? Going to be 2080? So those are things we have to talk about. All right. James, I'm going to turn it over to James.
Thanks for the intro, Alan. Good afternoon, board. As we've always said, you guys have really tough decisions to make, DFCs. And so we wanted to catch you up on the run that you haven't seen unless you have looked at the GMA 12 materials. GMA 12 is calling this PS41. And then we've got those other scenarios that Alan mentioned also. Just in case you hadn't been tracking or you're relatively new to the DFC process, PS4 pumping scenario, 4th round of planning. This is the first scenario. The idea was to include all of the permits from all the GCDs. And so that's where we get PS41 for the name. We're basically building this run on S19, which was the DFC run that was used in the last round of planning and ended up being used by the Water Development Board to calculate the mags. And so we stripped out all the pumping. There's a lot of details to alluvium on the next slide, but we stripped out all the pumping starting in 2025 and put in as best we could all of the permits from every district. And so the idea was, let's look at this run, let's see what happens, and we'll go from there. And so that's all documented in the GMA 12 minutes discussion, I believe, and you can go there for some more background. One thing we failed to do in our hurry as consultants is we failed to put the limestone pumping back in there. So I've tried to document that at every turn to make sure we don't do it again. I see Gary smiling. All right. Brazos River alluvium, I won't go into great detail here, but essentially trying to include all the permits. There's been an update since PS41. It doesn't really matter for the results you're going to see today, but you can just know that there's permits that are outside the grid for the Brazos River alluvium and the model. And so, so there are some adjustments there that we tried to document here just for transparency. Okay, so when we look at all of those, the pumping that was entered into the run based on the permits from each district, this is where we land. And we thought in general that everything was pretty close. It's the difference is here, what we're looking at, the top table is the AGS calculation, 702,000 acre feet per year and some change. Interra did similar work, 705 and some change. So we're a few thousand acre feet off. That can be caused by a lot of different things. Grid, how the Water Development Board defines the grid and which county it's in, right on the county line, and other factors. Generally, 335 and a little bit of change, and 335 and a little bit of change for the Simsboro. Very close. We are working through some of those details for, I think, a final database to be used moving forward. If you want to see what that looks like in Brazos Valley, here it is as far as pumping. So as I said, in 2025, you essentially put in all the permits, and you can see for each aquifer there, the writing is small, maybe you can't see, but the Simsboro there, the big blue line, is what's included all the way out to 2070. Here's the results. S19, where you sit today with the DFC at about 195. And again, this is calculated from 2010. Your DFC is 262, which is calculated from 2000. That's another topic for later in the talk. For comparison purposes, we're just using 2010 as our starting point here. You end up at 195. The PS41, you're down below 500. So that's where you'd end up if you pumped all those permits the whole time. And remember that that also includes everybody else's permits, Post Oak, Lost Pines, everywhere else. So it was illustrative and a lot of drawdown. You can see that the differences in the drawdown between where you're at today and where you'd be with all those permits is about 317 feet here in Brazos Valley, and Post Oak, it'd be about 335. And then there's a bunch of support slides that we included here just to show what the pumping was for other districts and what their drawdowns were. Here's Post Oak, a little over 600 there. And Lost Pines, 444 looks like. Texas, okay. And so all together, you throw all that together, the pumping is totaling about over 800,000. It's a really productive aquifer with a lot of permits and a lot of groundwater pumpage that's potentially occurring there. So as Alan said, at the April 23rd meeting, Post Oak GCD, Steve Young had presented a presentation looking at long-term results from modeling assessments to estimate sustainable production. And the takeaway from that is it's going to take a long time to get there, hundreds of years to reach some steady state. You start to pull water from other parts of the system that when you look at 50 years, you don't really see. And so that was the lead into a discussion that Alan had highlighted here about, some of the district reps talking about large projects being a bridge to the next thing. They can't be seen as permanent solutions. The aquifers just won't take it. And so that was the idea for a thought experiment. I'm calling it a thought experiment because the bottom line is it's not a proposal. The discussion, some of the discussion after the sustainability presentation was curtailment needs to happen pretty soon. Nobody's really modeled that yet. I think the group is looking at modeling that or cutbacks or adjustments or something. It depends on who is talking as to what word they want to use. But the bottom line is the thought experiment is, okay, if you use water and as a bridge to get to the next supply, as Alan said, lots of folks talking about that in the state today. What are the drawdowns if all the permits were reduced after 35 years? And say at 2060, you use the aquifers heavier than you would after that. And what is the worst case status of the Simsboro in 2060 by doing this approach? And again, it's not a proposal, it's a thought experiment because you have tough decisions to make about how you go about managing the aquifer long term. And there may be lots of different variables that come into play. The first one here is what we see with the blue line. This is the implementation of cutbacks, reductions, curtailments at 2059 from the PS41 scenario. So you're heading down to where you ended up at over 500 feet. When you turn the pumping back to 100% of S19 for those last 10 years, you end up at 281 instead of 195. If you cut it back even more to 75% in those last 10 years, you end up about 25, 30 feet below where you would with your current DFC. And if you cut it back in half, you end up above your current DFC. Again, a thought experiment. It's just to say how, if you were to cut back, there's lots of discussions about, across the GMA about cutbacks. So how does that play out? So that's what we're looking at. And here, you can see the differences for each one of those runs. If you cut back to 75% of S19 in those last 10 years, you end up with an additional 26 feet of drawdown. And at the end of, on average, if you cut back to 50% of S19, you end up above where you were with your current DFC, 34 feet higher. Those are the calculations. Any questions on that? And
So what it's showing is that the aquifers are very responsive to a pump hard, can be pumped hard, and then when turned back, the aquifer is gonna respond.
the model indicates that, and we've seen that kind of response in the Winter Garden area in South Texas, Carrizo, where they had quite a bit of production in the early part of the 19th century up through 50s and 60s. And because it's confined aquifer the same way it is here, you did see some rebound. Obviously, the numbers weren't the same and the rebound's not the same, but these aquifers do rebound. So the next, so I'm just stepping through each one of the districts here. There's Post Oak, similar response. Lost Pines, similar response. East Texas. And so simulated depth of water in feet. This is S19 and 2070, over 600 feet here in Bryan College Station area or north of there. I kind of see that where you end up in 2070 from your current DFC. If you run PS4 all the way to 2059, you're up at 1,200 feet. Again, a thought experiment, not a proposal. How do you cut back? How do you manage what's possible? The reason that we picked 2059 here is because in this case, for the cutback run, 2059 is the deepest part, the most drawdown in that scenario. And the point of showing you the depth of water is because it's very important to the socioeconomic discussion, right? There's lots of folks that are struggling with that. It has to do with mitigation. And so again, thought experiment, not a proposal. That's a real result. We know that that's a lot of drawdown and has impacts on big, wells and technology of pumping and motors and pumps and all that. So anyway, stepping forward, the bottom line is, after 35 years, bridge pumping, all those permits, you can probably move back to 60 to 70% of S19 and end up with similar DFCs as you had. So the idea, of course, is if you needed to adjust pumping or hit some target, when would you do it? How would you do it? Those are discussions that are happening. So we wanted to show you some of that. If we apply the same principle to the best estimate run, and I apologize for the wording here getting all messed up, but if we apply that same principle to the best estimate run, which I think y'all are familiar with, it includes the pumping from Upwell out to with a ramp up to 50,000 out to 2059, and then you cut it back to 100% of S19 G3, 80% of S19 G3, and 60% of S19 G3. The reason we did the best estimate run is because that's what we've been presenting at GMA 12. And would it be interesting just to look at how it responds? And essentially, if you, in those last 10 years, go back to your S19 G3 run, you end up at a little bit below where you're at on your current DFC. And if you cut back to 80%, you're above your current DFC. So, and this is, again, those numbers are a little different because we're going back to 2000 here. So the idea is, wanted to give you some insight into how aquifers respond, how all of these things affect long-term water levels in the aquifer. Here's a simulated depth of water under that scenario in 2070, at 800 feet, that's the best estimate. If we go to the cutbacks, then we've got, let's just go to the 100% cutback. You basically are at, like I said, 274 instead of 262. So a takeaway, an observation from a thought experiment is reducing pumping to 90% of S19G3 between 2060 and 2070 may be sufficient to match your current DSC. Okay, moving on to any questions about that before we move on to the topic of moving the starting line for your DFCs from 2000 to 2010.
One more time, what's the magical about 2059? Explain that again.
It was a thought experiment. We stopped there, gave it 10 years to respond.
Okay.
Nothing magical.
Okay.
Moving on, the comparison between 2000 and 2010, starting with using S19 are shown here. And these are the results. You've seen both these numbers in some of the prior graphs that I've shown. I've said, okay, depending on where you start at 2000 or 2010, that determines where you end up on the DFC. And then remember that the DFC of 262 also includes additional drawdown from the variance, which was required to kind of meet some criteria. Alan knows more history. These are your wells that you're using or monitoring wells throughout the district. And if we look at hydrographs for Robertson County, you essentially see that time period marked between the two lines there, the 2000 and 2010. And you can see with the circle there on the one well, in some cases, you don't have data in all of those wells in 2010. But most of these wells are behaving fairly linearly. We probably find a reasonable, in that time period, I should say, qualify that. In that time period, most of the wells were acting fairly linearly. And so, again, some places don't have data, but essentially, when you look at all of that data together and you post it on the map and you look at the arithmetic average of the artesian head decline from 2000 to 2024, you get 66 feet of decline. And that was of your 262 feet of DFC. And when you compare them side by side and you look at the last 5 years and you're estimating from 2000 and looking at what the numbers look like, you go from 32 to 66. That was the number we just mentioned. If you start in 2010, it's 11 down to 45. So approximately 21 feet of difference going during that decade. As we know, just a reminder, there's lots of things moving in the DFC joint planning process. One of them is models are updated. This is the memo from 2018. The model was updated and the consultants, the GMA12, looked at the differences, not changing anything or anything else, just looking at new dam and old dam. The old dam said GMA12 had, we have 231 feet of central decline. New dam said 126 to 131, depending on what assumptions you made. But and integrated it in. That's just one thing that's moving in the joint planning process. New data. Essentially, the first 3 rounds of planning, what was done is cause and effect. Pumping, they look at the output, the good. Well, if that's some more permits over here, well, we're going to include some growth over here. Well, these permits went away, we're going to take those out. That's been kind of the three rounds of good planning. That's kind of how it's been. We put in clauses, we see effects. And we have debates and we settle out of DFC. calculate the average, drawdown in each district, that's your BFC. Most of those are what I'd say relative benchmarks. And they've moved because of model updates like we just talked about. Pumping assumptions, so familiar with, permit updates, many other things. So, for the current round of planning, I think the question is how to set VFCs that find that balance between the highest practical production, conservation, preservation, all those things. That's the easy way to say that really hard job as a district. What it's boiled down to in a lot of ways, you'll know the 9 factors that you have to consider in determining those VFCs. And 2 of the biggest ones that continue to come up across the state, not just here, socioeconomic impact. And one small way to look at that is impacts on wells. And so that's what y'all have seen in the last few meetings, in what we can do with the modeling and the hydrogeology. And then, of course, private property considerations. And those 2 seem to be rising to the top in other places, and of course, environmental impacts and impacts on streams, groundwater pumping. That's obviously very important in some areas as well, depending on the groundwater surface water interaction. So that's it. We've got observations, no conclusions. It's basically here as input for your decision process. I think that. Your second to last thing, I just think it. Explain that again. That's just simply the difference between the 2 models.
Question. Your thoughts on us moving from, we're currently year 2000. We moved up to 2010, and the 21 feet of difference. Where we are, whether that's without any damages or anything of that nature, it would take us to basically a starting point. Lots of discussions about moving the starting line, moving the ending line, and the debate about that around the state. The bottom line is everybody else in GMA 12 has moved their starting line to 2010. You've got the data to show the differences, and you can account for that, and you'll see the clearly a policy decision on your part. I think we considered trying to address it from the data and science and the things, and just like every other BCD, it's kind of a policy decision. I don't know what the history is of in 2000. I think it's a data oriented at the 2000, so that was data. Yeah, but you'll have probably have as good or better than now. That's a policy decision. So we don't lose, we've identified what we were not willing to do. When Don and I were talking about this, and the other boards is don't lose sight of where we started. And how we clearly document that here with this, we started here, we moved it up to 2010. This shows it was about that 21 foot difference and
Yeah.
move on.
You considered the data and the science, and the rest of the decision is kind of policy oriented.
I know that when we had our DFC workshop, there was, I don't know, several that said, why wouldn't we move it up to 2010 and get in line with everyone else? So I think that for me, this answers it, that as long as we can document what we've done, that it's probably a good thing to go ahead and move it to 2010. So that's just my thoughts. I don't see, we've looked at what would be the downsides, what would be the upsides. I think all of that is a wash, as long as we have backup for what we've done and why we've done that. I'd love to hear any, I think, John, I think you were one that said, hey, why aren't we on the same page with everybody else?
Right. I think if you're trying to get to the same place, I don't know how you measure from a different way to get to the same place. It just doesn't add up. So with the DFC, and we're trying to manage to the DFC, and that's what we determine curtailment. So when curtailment hits, does all of GMA 12 curtail? If we're all aiming for one DFC,
You'd have to ask
so
them.
when curtailment hits, is it just?
It would be,
Well, DFCs are by district. I mean, we adopt them as a GMA, but then each individual district has to adopt its own specifics. We only adopt the DFCs for our 2 counties, and we're required to enforce the DFCs for those 2 counties. Doesn't mean we're not affected by the other counties and vice versa.
so one thing from this is I would recommend to you that we go ahead and make the policy decision to move our starting line to 2010, put it and get in line with all of the rest of the districts. But I think that we would need to note that, whether in the explanatory report or wherever, that here's where we were, here's why we moved, here's where we ended up. That'd be I'd ask that you approve that.
Entertain a motion on moving the starting point from 2000 to 2010.
So move.
A second.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
There's still gonna be some conversations. I know we haven't got into great detail at GMA 12 about the ending date. There's been thought that we don't, from my brain says is that it doesn't have to move from 2070, but the last 2 rounds that we've planned upon ending date was 2069 and 2070. So there's a thought that, we need to move it up to 2080. There are some districts, some GMAs that are doing that, going out to 2080. Now we're gonna have to account for 10 years more pumping as we move through on the DFC process. There is a thought that if we go on this 50-year, just like they are doing it, that the other thing to be said there is Region G and the State Water Plan are moving up to 2080. That they move it up in 10-year chunks. If we were to move, there should probably going to be a consideration of, well, maybe we could move it to 2075 because we're in 2025, 2026, move it up. So we're looking at a 50-year window. So there's not been any decisions made on that at GMA 12. I think we're probably going to make that pretty quick. I'm guessing it's going to become a thing that we've got to decide on. And so I need y'all to be giving some thought to that, what your thoughts might be. So anybody got any thoughts on how they might want to handle that? Okay. I think that's all I've got right now.
Any more items from the board on this item? Nope. All right.
Thank you.
Moving on to item number 5, executive session. This time the board will go into executive session under Texas Government Code 551071. Receive attorney-client privilege information regarding 1, pending transport permit applications for groundwater from the Sinsboro Aquifer. 2, pending contested permit applications for groundwater from the Sinsboro Aquifer. 3, pending writ of mandamus filed by Texas A&M University System and Brazos County District Court. Pending lawsuit, Fazino Investments versus Brazos Valley Groundwater Conservation District. establishing desired future conditions for all aquifers within the boundaries of BVGCD, water production, export, and administrative fees, and groundwater conservation district related issues in the 89th Texas Legislature. This time, the board will go in executive session. I haven't read time yet.
It's read it. Almost 5 o'clock.
Almost.
We can get them out in 5 o'clock traffic.
Yeah, great. Catch it coming and going. I appreciate that.
I think, are you ready over there?
All right, it is 4:53. We're coming out of executive session. Item number 6, discussion and possible action on items listed and deliberated in executive session as noticed above in agenda item 5. I make a motion that in reference to the board's order number 1 in the current SOA matter with the transport permit applications as listed, the board approves formal private mediation in place of the SOA mediation that was required to occur before discovery for the contested case hearing could begin.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Item number 7, general manager's report.
Okay. Y'all got in your email, you got today's report on drought conditions. Things are improving here. And I think we'll see a big improvement in the map next week from the recent rains we've gotten, although some areas really got it, some did not. It was pretty, anyway, it was not general. Going on through those, I'll let you look through those in your email. We did have one well that was GM permitted during the month of April for 71 acre feet. It was a Simsboro well for aluminum mining up at Kasi right along Highway 7. And it's for agricultural and wildlife use. They cut off some of the watershed going into a pond that was being used by one of the adjacent landowners and agreed to drill a well for that use. So we have that one. Also in your packet, you'll find the most recent update of all permits, production, that type of thing. It's also online. We talked about our legislative concerns. We've updated you. This is a listing of all the different all the different bills that we've been tracking through the years. So I might want to take it and peruse that. I won't go through any more of those. The first 2 pages are those that were of the most concern to us. And that Gertis bill that we talked about is 2078. Moving on to, I told you last meeting that we've talked about the permits that have been either reduced or relinquished. So at this point, we've had 25 permits in 2025 that something has been done to the permit. In the alluvium, we've had a total of 15 of those 25 were alluvial wells. 13 of those for that 1,858.20. That's all of those 13 wells will be plugged. They've been taken out of production and will be plugged. 12 of those were Union Pacific, and one was just a really old well for Lee Fazino. 2 permits reduced for 50 acre feet. You can see the rest of them there. The 2 Sparta wells with relinquished permits for Mr. Martin, I believe is his name, over off of Old Reliance Road. Those used to be frac wells for Hawkwood, Halcon. He has no need for that, so he's turning those into he has turned them into exempt wells, and they're currently setting 4-inch pipe inside those 8-inch casings so that he can actually use them at a 35 or less gallons per minute. So a total of 25 permits have had something done to them. 2,297.72 acre feet, less than what I anticipated with our change from actual production, collecting fees on actual production to permitted amounts. I look back and I can say that I shouldn't be surprised that it was this low a number because we only are charging that $4.77.5 per acre foot for permitted amounts just to make up that shortfall this year from, adding the 24 and the 25. I think next year when we have to go to the full amount in order to meet our budgeted amounts, we'll probably see a good many might fall then. So we'll see. And that's not our intent. I was just making comment of it. Yes, tomorrow is the last day that they'll, both Ermine and Megan will be teaching. We wrapped up with over at Welborn Middle School. And so I think they're probably relieved and we'll take the summer and get ready for next year. I think that I'll let y'all read through that. And then, of course, we always have the update to the management plan, making sure that we're staying on course to meet all of our objectives. I will, that one little red, right down at the very bottom, our total fees collected, 440, this is water production fees, $440,042.52. You can see that that's just about a third of the total fees that we should be collecting. So we're definitely right on track to, get everybody paying and everything going. And I will reiterate, it was surprising. I know it's to me, I think it was to Cynthia, we have had very little pushback on the fact that we've changed over to the permitted amounts. There's a lot of people that never got an invoice. They just didn't get one because they didn't produce them. They had wells that were capped and just didn't get any pushback. They were just more than happy to get things in. So that was a very pleasant surprise, and we greatly appreciate it. So that's all I've got. Anybody got any questions on that?
Any questions for Adam? Item number 8, discussion and possible future agenda items.
Next month, I know of 2 things. One, Dr. Joe Yelderman and Mark Nichols are coming to give a summation of the final report on the Brazos River alluvium study. And I will have James and Chris, one or both here to my plans are to have them to do our DFC compliance presentation at the next meeting for those 2 things for sure.
Anything from the board that you'd like to see? All right. Item number 9, adjourned. Thank y'all.
You